Introduce yourself.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name's Jeff Norris, and I'm here to do I like to say Jeff Talk, kind of like TED Talk, okay?
You're coining the phrase.
All right. I'm going to talk about emotional child abuse.
Goodness.
And I have a friend here, Mark. He's behind the camera, so you'll know who the other voice is that you're here on the video. And I tell people, if you had a happy childhood, an idyllic childhood with loving parents, this may not be something you want to watch.
100% of children are not happy all of the time, correct?
No, I say there's millions
Yes.
that this may apply to, but I've written a book also that's published on Amazon, and I find people that have had an abusive childhood love the book. People who had an idyllic childhood, they don't even want to bother reading it.
Right.
So I'm just telling people up front what this is about and whether they'll want to watch or not.
What types of abuse are there, Jeff?
Well, I'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. The purpose of this video is that I want to see if I can help somebody. If I help just one person, I've won. And what I want to do is make sure that the abuse you suffered as a child, and for me it was emotional abuse, doesn't rule your life. A lot of people are angry. You've got to let that anger go. If you let it rule your life, it'll be ruined. And I want to help people understand the anger they may be feeling, not realizing it, and what I have, and how it damaged my life, and how I discovered it, and what I did to change my life. So, and just as a little few housekeeping things, so people will want to know, I tell everyone I'm looking down the gun barrel at 70 years old. In a little over a year, I'll be 70. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I have no professional degree in either of those. What I do have is I've talked to countless people who are qualified in this subject. I've read countless articles, countless books about that. So I feel like I'm sort of a lay expert. And interestingly enough, I talked to some psychiatrists at Emory University, and after talking to them, they said, "You seem to be somewhat of a gifted lay therapist." So
That's a huge compliment.
yeah, I was stunned. So
And for the audience, Emory is in America, in Atlanta.
in Atlanta, where
Okay.
I currently live on the outskirts of Atlanta.
And it is a big teaching hospital, correct?
Correct. All right.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
When did you have this realization that you could, A, define it, and B, perhaps help other people?
It wasn't until I was 30 years old.
Goodness me. Right.
Until then, all the anger that I didn't realize I had and that I was projecting, I didn't realize I was even projecting it
Right.
until 30 years old. But there were some physical effects that I started noticing when I was 30. And I go into those very specifically in case it's happening to you.
Okay.
And you might say, well, why can't I sleep well? Or why can't I remember certain things? And I might have some answers to some questions that you may have wondered about.
By projecting for, say, a high school audience, you're projecting the behavior of others, but it's coming from within yourself. Is that a result of the abuse?
Yes, I'm projecting. I was abused emotionally as a child.
Right.
The natural result of that is, any psychiatrist will tell you, one of the natural results is anger.
Okay.
All right. You talk angry. You think angry.
Right.
You project anger. And the worst part about it is, I didn't realize I was doing that. I had no idea. But I'll explain why I had no idea, as we go on.
Well, sir, the floor's yours.
Okay. And just as a little more housekeeping, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
All right. I grew
Great
up
city.
in Pittsburgh in the 50s and 60s.
Great time.
Well, the steel mills were still going at 100%. And I can remember driving down along the river, looking across the river at the steel mills, and just watching them spewing out gobs of black smoke from their smokestacks, just spewing it out 14 hours a day. And I thought, how can they do that? That can't be good. And supposedly my grandfather, who died when I was very young, used to tell everyone, in the 30s in Pittsburgh, if you drove downtown during the day, you had to use your lights because the pollution was that bad. I was a swimmer as a kid, and I can remember my friend's father, who was bald, when we went to practice, and we were near a steel mill. After practice, he'd go like that to wipe the soot off his head. I mean, that's how I grew up.
It's like Mayberry with smoke.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know Mayberry, but so, and I had allergies to dust growing up. I used to take allergy shots, and I thought, well, gee, I wonder where I was inhaling all this dust, you know. It was, and I lived in a suburb of Pittsburgh, and then we were the second suburb outside of downtown, so we were close, 10 miles. All right. I grew up, all I wanted to be as a kid was a pilot. And I didn't want to be a military pilot. I didn't want to be an instructor pilot. I wanted to be an airline pilot.
A lot of boys' dreams.
To me, there was nothing cooler than sitting in the cockpit of one of those big airplanes with those clocks and instruments in front of you and just going all over the world. I mean, I loved museums. I just wanted to see the world. That's all I could think about. I built model airplanes. I even applied to the Naval Academy as a pilot, but when I was 25, so they said, no, you can't be a pilot. But I went to Embry-Riddle University. I started at Northwestern. I was playing football for Northwestern. Okay. Decided that's not where my life was going to go, and so I went to Embry-Riddle, which is an aeronautical university in Florida. Okay. And aeronautical studies was my major, and I learned to fly there. And for the next 10 years, I just flew. I flew every airplane that nobody wanted to fly. I flew old World War II bomber trainers with cargo all over the world, not over the world, all over the US, and I was a flight instructor for 10 years, and at 30, I started applying to the airlines, but when I was applying, pilots were a dime a dozen. Really? You know, when I applied to United, there was 2,000 of us that applied for 500 jobs. You know, so when I saw the writing on the wall that it wasn't going to happen, I changed direction, fooled around for a couple years doing odd jobs, and then settled into an aviation insurance company. I figured, well, might as well use the aviation I had and work for a company insuring airplanes, and then after 5 years of doing that, I went out on my own and opened up my own insurance agency. And for the last nearly 30 years, I've had a program, nationwide program, for skydiving airplanes, to insure skydiving airplanes. And during this time, I was also a skydiver. I have 1,300 jumps. So that's my life. You know, and here I am.
The dream that, therefore, you flew privately, correct? So,
correct.
So the dream wasn't shattered, but you just weren't paid for it.
Well, the dream was shattered because I wanted to be an airline pilot.
Okay.
That's all I wanted. I still would like to be an airline pilot. You know, I have airplanes hanging from my ceiling. You know, I love aviation history. Just,
Of course, during my day, just to segue into the next chapter here, British Airways did do an apprenticeship in England
oh, really?
in the 70s. And of course, I chose to go to drama school, which was a big mistake. Enough about me. Please.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. So again, hopefully this talk will help someone. Maybe they'll see something they didn't see before. And one little trick, if you hear a little choking in the background, I have a 19-year-old Pomeranian, and she's struggling a little.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
She's a sweetheart, but she's 19 years old. But in any case, there's a couple little tricks I have when I started learning about things that I needed to learn about. I said, if you want to understand a person and why they're acting the way they are, don't look at that person and see how he's acting. Look at what that person's looking at and see what they're looking at and how they're reacting to what they're looking at. And that will tell you more about that person than just watching them.
That's interesting. I've never heard that one before. Do you want to pause?
No, I just want to make sure she looks okay. She'll calm down.
So, you're looking at the behaviour of someone who is looking at the behaviour of another, and that gives you a clear indication as to the character.
Well, you're saying, why is that person behaving that way?
Yes.
And they're reacting to something external, so that's what you got to look at first to understand why they're reacting the way they are.
So, the complainer at a restaurant, you know, nothing's really wrong, but the complainer complains because perhaps, you know, he wants his date to prove that he's a strong man, and
or he just had a fight with his wife and just is angry, and that's what he's truly angry about. And you look at him, he's not really angry about the menu. He's angry about something else, and it's just coming out about that.
So the external behaviour is sometimes the result of an internal issue that happened in the past.
Well said.
Which is where we're going.
So let's start talking about child abuse.
Sure.
Now, as I understand it, child abuse is basically a three-legged stool. There's physical abuse, there's sexual child abuse, and then there's emotional child abuse. All right. Usually, and I gotta believe almost every time that there was any physical or sexual abuse, emotional abuse is always a component. In addition, you really can't have one of those without the emotional abuse. Interesting thing, what I'm talking about is someone that is just subject to emotional child abuse, solely emotional child abuse. My father never beat me, I was never sexually abused, but I was violently, emotionally abused, and that was all. And I'll explain exactly what that meant and how that was. But before I explain, I want to explain what that kind of emotional child abuse, and it's basically anger and directed at your way. I mean, in a nutshell, I grew up and my father never said one nice thing to me. I never heard a compliment from my father. He never said anything. And that would have been okay if that was the only problem. But instead of compliments, I was bombarded by humiliating, condescending, and angry comments constantly. I never heard anything else. I didn't know what a compliment was. But I'll go into that in more detail. I want to explain, of course, physical and sexual abuse causes physical damage to the body. What most people don't really consider is emotional abuse causes damage, physical damage to the body. You don't see it, that's why people don't discuss it quite as much, but what it does is there's two main hormones that I've learned that are involved in this. The first one is cortisol. All right, that's the hormone that is produced when you're in a stressful environment. That might be the fight or flight hormone. That's the one, the anger hormone. You know, that's cortisol. The interesting thing about that is if you are being flooded with cortisol, which I was, because that's all I got as a kid, that prevents the encoding of memories to your brain, which basically it's keeping you from learning things that you should learn.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone can. And I'll give a perfect example that I just was talking to you about earlier. I was madly in love with this girl as a senior in high school. I'm still not sure why she went out with me, as you'll learn later. But we spent hours during the day talking. We spent hours on the phone at night. And I can see myself in my brain laying on my back on the floor, talking on the phone, on the extension, and talking to her. And we dated for 1.5 years. I can't remember a single conversation, the content of a single conversation. It's totally blank. And it bothers me because that was maybe one of the few happy things in my childhood, and yet I can't remember a single conversation. And it's just strange, and I didn't understand why I couldn't until I started reading about cortisol and emotional child abuse and the physical damage it does to your brain.
So you're almost simulating that. Well, nothing's going in, nothing's being processed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another example, when I went to school, well, of course, we all took spelling class, where you had to learn how to spell.
Yeah.
I struggled so much with that because I couldn't memorize anything. I wanted to be an actor as a kid, too.
Did you really?
Yeah, but I knew you had to memorize lines.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I could do that, because I had no ability to memorize or remember things. I didn't know why. I didn't know it was different. I didn't know I had that problem. Well, I knew I had that problem, but I thought that was normal. I thought everybody had trouble memorizing. I didn't realize it was just me.
Yes, and obviously I overcame that problem. I'm not here to talk about me or acting, but it is a different process. In another video we could perhaps talk about. But you're talking specifically about emotion memory,
Yes.
which a lot of actors use to recall, and then you play a character. So that emotion memory with those conversations that you had with your girlfriend is latent, is blank.
Gone.
Unbelievable.
Totally gone. And it just still bothers me. And not just those conversations, sorry to interrupt, but
not at all.
I can remember all the stabs in the heart that I got as a kid, metaphorically stabs in the heart, but so much of my childhood is blank. I went to swim practice every day. I can hardly remember any swim practices. It's just like, it's almost a clean white screen. I can't remember. And again, it's because I was being so bombarded with cortisol that it prevented the encoding of memories.
So is this something that you're saying will affect a percentage of the population? Will they relate to this?
I'm curious to find out. I really don't know.
Comments below.
Yeah. As far as I understand, I'm obviously not the only one that grew up in a abusive, emotional family. But it was just amazing growing up, realizing I couldn't memorize, I couldn't remember things, and I thought it was normal. I thought everybody had that problem.
How many siblings did you have?
I had one older sister and one younger brother.
So you're the middle child.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which might explain a lot.
Well, not at all, because the middle child, my sister, is the one that has all the charisma and the popularity. I'm the eldest child, so I was the one that was...
Well, I didn't have popularity, as you'll find out. I had the opposite.
Interesting.
But let's go on.
Carry on.
Okay. The next hormone, the second hormone that's so important, that's related to emotional child abuse specifically, is oxytocin.
Okay.
Okay. Oxytocin is the one that we all produce when we're forming bonds with your parents, with your friends. It's the warm and fuzzy hormone. It's the one that makes you feel nice. It's the one that keeps you from being anxious. It's the one that should be flooding your brain as a toddler in order to help the brain growth. All right? I had none of that. You know, there was never, and I think, and maybe I had some, but again, the cortisol was just flooding my body constantly. So I never felt any bonding kind of relationship with either of my parents or with anybody. I didn't know such a thing was possible.
Is that why people take supplements and sometimes abuse Oxy? Because they have...
Oxy? I mean...
Oxycontin.
No, that's a painkiller.
Okay, that's a different thing.
That's all different, yeah, that's a different process.
Okay.
I believe.
Because I'd like to talk about that in a future episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not an expert on that. So, basically, I grew up angry. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, there's 3 different parental environments that I don't know if people realize that they're actually exposed to when they're growing up. There's the father environment, there's the mother environment, and then there's the combination father and mother environment. And each one has a very specific effect on the overall effect that you go through. And I'll explain. Let me talk about the daddy environment first. All right. And to do that, I have to explain, a little about my father. My father was an MIT graduate, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Very bright man. He was a construction engineer. That's what he got his degree in at MIT. All right. He grew up in Chicago. But I'm pretty sure, and I've talked to a lot of people, and this is a very bold statement to make, I'm pretty sure my father was a violent psychopath. All right. Now, when I say violent psychopath, he was not physically violent. He was not sexually violent, but he was emotionally violent. And he was psychopathic. And in order to understand that, you have to understand what a psychopath is. And the number one thing that I read and the experts tell me is a total lack of empathy for anyone around them. And that fits my father to a T. And as a result, I didn't know what empathy was growing up. I didn't learn that. Another one is the incapacity to love. I don't think my father really had the capacity to love. He never told me he loved me. He never made any kind of loving gestures towards me. He didn't do that towards anyone else. So, and a sociopath, or a psychopath, not sociopath, psychopath.
Yeah.
Psychopath, he had no friends. He had no kind of bonding with us or with anyone around him. And then when I say violent, emotionally violent psychopath, sorry, I didn't mean to kick the camera. My father never said one kind word to me. He never said, Jeff, I love you, or Jeff, you're a great swimmer, or Jeff, that was really good what you did. I never heard a compliment growing up, which is fine if he's not talking to you. Not hearing a compliment is not good, but what's bad is in place of where I would normally be receiving compliments, he would be criticizing me, humiliating me, condescending to me, angry with me. Everything he said was violently, emotionally damaging. He never said anything nice. And I'll give you some examples. I mean, well, first, and I see in my notes, first, and the problem with that is, that's exactly how I learned to talk. Because that's all I ever heard. If you grow up in a family and your father's got a southern drawl, well, guess what? You're going to talk in a southern drawl. So my father never spoke to me in anything but an angry, condescending word. So that's how I talked to everyone. And as a result, I had no friends. And it went further than that. I was the kid in school that everybody hated. You know, I didn't really understand why. I understood that nobody liked me, but I didn't understand why. And it was because my normal accent, my normal way of speaking was exactly what I heard talking to me, and that's how I talked to everybody.
Amazing. Just
like he talked to me. So, and let me give you an example of what he would say. I remember he was a math genius, MIT graduate, and I would be struggling with my math homework in school. So I would go down the steps from my bedroom into the bedroom where he had a little office and ask for help. And his favorite line, and what would have been a perfect bonding time, you know, father teaching their son, you know, math. What a perfect opportunity to bond with somebody. His favorite line was, in an angry voice, would you just be quiet, you know, quit running at the mouth and try and engage your mind for once. In other words, quit being so stupid. And it was funny where it could have been a bonding kind of situation. I would end up going back upstairs. Yeah, I think I had learned something, but I'd go up in tears because I was so humiliated. You know, I had just gone down asking for help. My father basically said, quit being so stupid and engage your brain for once. And that was his favorite conversation. Oh, and the other one, that attacked my mental ability. But as a kid, I was pretty much an elite athlete. And I looked up on 23andMe, you know, the genetic site, yeah. And it says I am genetically predispositioned because I have some muscle density like elite power athletes do. So I was gifted as, and should have been a, you know, star athlete in school.
Yeah, you can tell.
Well, thank you. But interestingly enough, my father, he, for some reason, found it necessary to say, Jeff, you know, as far as sports go, you just have innate poor, and he called it ball coordination. You know, basically what he was telling me is, if you want to join a sport that has a ball, football, baseball, anything, you're not going to be any good because you were just born with poor ball coordination. You know, another father would say, well, if he's having trouble catching fly balls, let's go out in the backyard and catch and play catch with my son, and let's work on that together. He was, there's no point in this. You've got innate, you're genetically flawed with bad ball coordination. And the funny thing was, at the time he said it, I had gone out for Little League Baseball. I think I was 8 or 9 years old, and I knew nothing about baseball. And I was playing catcher. I thought I was doing pretty good. I was playing catcher because I was afraid of pop flies, not being able to get a pop fly. So I played catcher and I was doing good. But my father said, yeah, you got poor ball coordination. So I thought, well, I'm wasting my time playing baseball. And I went to my coach and I said, yeah, I'm quitting. This isn't for me, because I figured with bad ball coordination I wouldn't. And I can still remember my coach, and it's odd. I was 8 years. He said, Jeff, you're hitting 450 for a batting average. And in baseball, you know, the top professional baseball player might hit 320, you know, a third. So 450 means I was hitting .45. I was hitting almost and getting on base almost every other time I was at bat.
How long did you take that criticism at that time, given the fact that you were excelling in baseball and yet your father was?
I didn't think I was excelling in baseball.
Okay.
And that's where he said, you have bad ball coordination. I knew nothing about baseball. And when the coach said, you're hitting 450, he was saying, in reality, Jeff, you're hitting better than anybody else that's playing. In my mind, I have bad ball coordination, and I'm not even hitting half the time I'm getting up for to bat. I'm thinking, I'm wasting my time. I'm not even getting up to bat half the time. And little did I realize that I was hitting better than anybody else, in the league. But I had bad ball coordination, so I might as well not bother. So I quit playing baseball.
How sad.
I mean, and then I tell another little funny story it's just sort of a sideline story, and I think I was only 4 or 5. My mother used to send me down to work with my dad in his tool shop. And working with my dad consisted of, Jeff, sit over on that seat and don't say anything while I work, and you just watch and learn. But don't talk to me. And I used to watch him, and it was like he was in love with his tools, and he coveted his tools. He had a little spot for each tool, and it had a little outline for each tool. And I think I was jealous of the tools and the attention that he was giving them. So one night when I was 4 or 5 years old, I snuck down in the basement at night. I climbed up on the tool bench, and I took down a hammer, a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, a chisel, and then I totally wrapped them up in masking tape. I made mummies out of them all, and then I took them into another room in the basement and hid them underneath the shelf. And looking back on it, I think I was jealous of the attention he was showing the tools, and I thought I had taken care of the problem. And
I think that's symbolism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mummifying them and then hiding them.
Yeah, and then hiding him, so maybe the attention might be directed towards me, that he was directing towards his tools. And of course he found them.
What was the reaction?
Well, I got an hour lecture about stealing.
Okay.
And I can remember just not hardly paying attention to it, while I was getting the lecture on stealing. Yeah.
So there was a degree of removal from you even at that age. There was I'm not listening to this. Even though...
Now that you mention it, yes.
Now that you can recall those negative conversations. However, you can't recall a lot of what should have been positive.
All right.
Interesting. So that formulated the next chapter, obviously, or the next theme that we're going to discuss.
The next one was I was a champion swimmer. Believe it or not. And I was also suffering with clinical chronic depression. And I can explain that, and I'll explain that later on after I give this example.
Please do, that's important.
Okay.
Please do.
Okay. Maybe I'll do that first.
I would like that.
Okay. All right. everyone knows what depression is, you know, but it's more than, oh, I feel sad. It's like, what is it really doing to your body more than just, oh, I'm making you feel sad? And the effect that the depression had on me, and it was from this overbombardment of cortisol, from no oxytocin, loving, bonding kind of thing, the stress, fight or flight, angry the whole time, and that's how I lived. As a result, I never slept at night for more than an hour at a time. I literally, for the first 30 years of my life, because of the depression, and it can affect your sleep, it can make you sleep too much or not enough, I literally woke up every night 10 times, once an hour. And again, I didn't realize that wasn't normal. I thought that's how everyone slept. And I can remember as a kid, waking up, it's 2 in the morning, closing my eyes, waking up, it's 3 in the morning. I was basically subjecting myself to what the CIA would use as, you know, torture, interrupting sleep, as a normal way of living. I thought it was normal to wake up 10 times every night. And there was never a break from that. So as a consequence, the depression affected my sleep, and as a consequence, I went to school every day tired.
And depressed.
And depressed. Yeah, because I had never gotten a good night's sleep.
Did the depression inhibit interaction with people at school, teachers?
Oh, well, people at school, remember, I was talking angry to everyone.
You weren't popular, right?
Oh, no, I was hated.
Right.
I was the kid everybody hated, and rightfully so. By the way I was talking to everyone was the way my dad was talking to me.
When did you realize that you were depressed?
I was 30 years old, all right? I had a girlfriend, and she thought we were going to have the time of our life, and at around 11 o'clock at night, she gave me half of a Quaalude. And I had never had a Quaalude in my life, and she said, this will heighten the sexual experience. This will be like nothing you've ever experienced before. And I said, well, okay. And I took that Quaalude, and the way she relates it is, I fell asleep while we were kissing. And the funny thing was, it was at 11 at night, I slept for 7 hours straight.
Wow.
And I remember waking up in the daylight, being super confused because I should have woken up at midnight an hour later when it was still dark, and an hour later, and how could it be light at midnight? I didn't understand. And then when I finally figured out that I had slept a whole night, I was stunned. And I told her, I can't believe it, I can't believe it. I slept the whole night. And of course she went, yeah, I can believe it. You snored the whole night. But that was the first time in my life when I was 30 years old that I actually slept for a whole night.
Goodness me.
And then when I realized it was possible, then the brain started slowly healing. You know, I was no longer at home, I was out of that environment, and my brain slowly started. It took about 10 to 15 years, but for the first year, I might have slept an hour and a half sometimes. For the second year, I might have slept 2 hours at once. For the third year, I would sleep maybe 2.5 hours. You know, so I think I have the greatest life in the world right now because I can sleep at night.
Yeah.
But it only took me 40 years to learn how to do that. So, in any case, back to being a swimmer as a kid.
Yeah.
I was literally a champion swimmer as a kid, but I was sleep deprived and living with chronic severe depression the whole time. And it kind of bothers me because I think, what could I have done if I, you know, felt good, which I kind of feel today during swim practice when I swim.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell a story about that, but the last story I want to tell about my father is I think I was about 15 and I was on a swim relay team. And we were at a swim meet on the weekend, and it was at a local high school. And our little 15-year-old relay, we were out to break a national record. We were out to break an American record. Now, we were 15, we're the older age group. Usually that means they swim the last event of the swim meet.
Yeah.
And by then, all the parents who've been sitting there for 6, 7, 8 hours watching their kid go up and down the pool are more than happy. All they want to do is get out and go home. Grab their kid. Okay, I've done my duty. Let's get the hell out of here.
We've seen it, haven't we? At our club.
So, yes. Yeah. So I expected when I went out to swim this last relay, last event of the meet, that there might be 10 people in the audience, all parents of people on the relay. And we started off in the gymnasium in the high school, and we got a little card, and I can remember the guy walking all the relay people down the hall into the pool. And when we hit the pool, it was packed, and the place exploded. Everybody was waiting, sorry about kicking it, everybody was waiting for our team to see if we broke the American record. I mean, they went nuts. And I couldn't believe it because I was expecting an empty hallway. And I kind of looked for my father, and he was like this, sitting in a chair. He was reading a book, and he hadn't looked up yet, you know.
It seems to me as though your success was a jealousy factor in his life.
I wondered that.
Yeah, he's jealous. MIT, what came after, I don't know. But here's my son, who's pretty damn bright. He's great at sports. And here he is just basically broken a swimming record. He doesn't like it.
And there's one other case where we play racquetball when I'm 30 that I'll tell you, I'm very, and I can remember the relay, you know, we were out to try and break the American record.
Yeah.
I wasn't the fastest on the relay, but I think I was second fastest. I can remember the first guy bombing down, hitting his turn, coming back, and then the second guy launching off the starting block, going down, coming back, and by then we were 4 body lengths ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
And the crowd was going nuts. And then I was third. I was so pumped up that I can still feel it. I hit that water. I swam the fastest 2 lengths in my life that I ever did. And then the fastest kid went fourth. He came in to the wall, bam, like this to the wall, and the whole place hushed. And the head starter, I still remember, goes, "It's a national record." And the place went berserk. Oh. It went, everyone's jumping up and down, everybody's hugging. My father's over there, he looks up. All the other parents are coming, hugging their kids, slapping them on the back. And all of a sudden I see my father walking through the crowd. He comes up to me, he puts his hand out, shakes my hand, and then walks off.
Because he didn't like it.
That was the only complimentary type thing my dad did ever in his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he shook my hand because I broke a national record.
Yeah, and to be absolutely at one with oneself. Say a colleague of mine, various colleagues of mine have done very, very well in the theatre, the West End film. You have to be happy for that event, that you shared part of their life. And I'm happy for you that you're in this wonderful movie directed by Christopher Columbus. And that, I think that says a tremendous amount about the self and how your father probably just wasn't happy with himself.
And it's odd. My father grew up in Chicago.
Yeah.
In high school, he was 6'3", 200 pounds. And it was in the 40s that he was in high school. And he didn't play any sports.
Was his dad around?
Was his dad around?
Hmm?
Yeah, but his dad owned a bar/nightclub.
Oh, that's
nightclub.
That's not not the most efficient use of time.
Yeah.
I'm euphemizing.
Yeah.
But so
I mean, imagine being in the 1940s at high school and being 6'3" and 200 pounds. You're the biggest.
oh, you're God.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're the biggest. You should be in every sport.
Oh, absolutely.
And
yeah, sure.
he would go sailing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't do baseball. He didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So, and it turns out, and I can tell the story later. I don't know if when I played him in racquetball much later in life, he was the one that had poor ball coordination. He was a clumsy, not very coordinated guy.
Did you tell him?
No. No, I didn't. But that's another long story that I can tell. But
Oh my goodness me. So that's really covering I call them the formative years, you know, the teen years. A big education graduate, you know, there are formative years where kids' minds are built. Ends about 25. I'm not sure whether we're whether we are there yet in your story.
my mind starts to grow, and it's the strangest thing, and I'm not even sure how to explain it. When I was about 30 or 35, I could feel my brain starting to change.
Really?
Yeah. It was the oddest thing, and some of the effects, I knew something was going on in my brain, and I think certain pathways and synapses that should have formed with oxytocin as a child and gotten developed started developing when I was in my 30s. You know, things that should have been maturing in my
Yes.
brain as a toddler
Yes.
started happening to me in the 30s.
Yeah. Can you give me an example? Is it awareness or perception or cognitive ability?
I grew up with no empathy
Okay.
because empathy's learned.
Sure.
In a way, I grew up with all of a sudden I could empathize.
Could you?
Yeah, and I said, this is the strangest thing.
Yeah.
I think I know how that person feels.
Yeah.
And that sort of situation never happened to me. And the other really strange thing that everybody notices, all of a sudden, yellow became a production of Oxycontin, or no, what?
Don't ask me.
I can't remember.
Anything.
You got me on the pain medication. Oxytocin.
Yeah,
Oxytocin.
oxytocin is the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah. All of a sudden,
Yellow.
was producing oxytocin in my brain.
How?
I could feel it. Well, there's something that's called synesthesia, which the brain gets colors and things mixed up with emotions. And I think I might have a little bit of that, but yellow produces oxytocin in my brain like I know other things should have as a kid.
So, is that anything to do with the Steelers or not? Or you were just aware that something was
Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah. What color are they?
They were black and gold, kind of.
Okay.
But I buy all DeWalt tools because they're yellow.
Because they're yellow. Yeah.
I have a yellow truck. I have yellow shoes.
You have a yellow house.
The room is yellow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And around 35 or 40, all of a sudden, yellow was producing this hormone in me that made me feel warm and fuzzy.
Really?
Yeah.
Goodness me. And you were mid-career at that time?
No, I was just starting my insurance agency.
You were just starting your company.
Yeah.
So, I mean, was there a great change? Had you made financial gains? Had you, for example, bought this house? Was there anything that changed you? What went from being a depression to being a very positive life? How long did that take?
20 years.
20 years?
Yeah.
20 years?
Yeah. I tell everybody this process, as long as you were in the process bad, is about the same time it takes to fully come out of it.
Wow, goodness me.
Yeah.
That's a long, long time.
Yeah, very long. I wake up every day now thinking, how is this day going to be better than the previous day?
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's, I mean...
Does that include your leadership of a master's swim team?
That's fun. Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that because they fired the coach and somebody had to take over, and
Yeah, yeah.
and I would have been more than happy for someone else to do that, but I don't mind doing it.
Yeah.
And everyone seems to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all right. Welcome back. I just want to sit on the commercial.
It's mutually saying that.
Yeah.
Welcome back,
okay.
Jeff. Welcome back.
All right, we just had our commercial. Welcome back.
So we're picking up on your final father story.
I do have one more story I forgot about, one more father story, and you understand why I want to tell this one. When I was a kid, we used to go to a little resort up in the Pennsylvania mountains called Deer Valley.
Okay.
All right, it was cabins, and they had a lake, and there was rowing, sailboats, and the parents were able to send the kids off in the morning, and they would go play with them, you know, in games and stuff, while the parents had a break from the kids.
Idyllic.
Yeah. Of course, it was probably a day or two before I realized that none of the kids wanted to play with me. You know, because again, I was still talking to them like I talked to everybody else. And I learned, and the one example I get, do you know how to play Red Rover? Red Rover, send Mark over. Kids line up in opposite lines, opposite each other, and they're arm in arm. And one side will go, Rover, Red Rover, send Billy over. All right, and then Billy goes over and he tries to crash through and breaks through the arms.
Okay.
Okay. If he breaks through the arms, he gets to drag one of the people from that line that he just broke through back to his line.
Okay.
If he doesn't break through, then he's relegated to the line he wasn't able to break through. And so it's whatever line has...
Strongest line wins?
Yes, less. So, of course, all the kids pick a team leader at the beginning, and then the team leaders pick who they want on their side. And I've learned in grade school and high school and gym class that it would always be me and the Jewish kid that played violin in concert were the last two to be picked. Everyone would pick their friends, and it would just be me and me. And then you would see the other team captains go, well, we really don't want either of them. And the adult in charge would say, well, Jeff, you go to that side, and Billy, the violin kid, you go to that side. And
yeah,
you know,
another kind of negative. Yeah, we had games like that. You know, we had picks, and if you were the last pick, you remember being the last pick.
well, and if you're the last pick, it's probably because you're the worst in baseball,
Yeah.
or you're worse in kickball, or
Sure.
you're worse. I was the best, and I was still picked last.
Wow.
It was because
Wow.
nobody wanted anything to
Yeah.
do with me.
Yeah, yeah,
It was kind of a humiliation.
yeah, yeah.
You know, the snotty-nosed kid there that could hardly run, and me were the ones standing there like this, waiting to be picked, that never got picked. But in any case, so
At least you went average.
yeah. And the funny thing is, whatever team I was on, we'd win. And it's usually because I hit a home run or something.
Yeah, yeah. It is ironic. You begin to think, what am I good at? Carry on. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, so after 2 days, none of the kids wanted to have anything to do with me, so I was just kind of meandering around, sitting around, not doing anything. This was before video games, obviously.
Yeah.
And so my mother told my dad, take take him sailing. You know, take your son sailing. And that would have been, what a wonderful, talk about idyllic father-son thing to do, bonding, a chance to bond. And my dad had loved to sail, and that's what he did in high school instead of playing sports, because I don't think he got along with anyone to play sports. But I could see he had been out for 3 or 4 days by himself, having a great time sailing by himself. And I could see him kind of go like this when he decided that I had to go sail with him. So he said, okay. And it was a little 20-foot sailboat that had 2 sails. You know, I wasn't allowed to touch the rudder or touch the mainsail. My only job was to hold on to the line, they call it in sailing, of the rope that snugged up the little triangular jib sail that was on the front of the boat. All right, and my only job was to, when he came about or was sailing around, to hold that line tight so the sail didn't luff. It was called. Luffing is when a sail kind of flaps in the wind.
That was it.
For an hour and a half, all I heard is the jib's luffing, stop the jib luffing. You're not controlling the jib. You know, critical, stop the jib luffing. It's luffing, it's luffing. That's all he said to me for an hour and a half, was correcting me on the jib. So when it was over, I was more than ready to quit sailing with my dad. But the interesting thing that happened was 40 years later, my niece is now 12 or 13 years old, and she's visiting my parents with my brother's daughter. And guess what? Dad takes them out sailing. And my niece is living in Atlanta, and she comes back to me. She used to wakeboard with me and water ski with me. And she was telling me about her trip to visit the grandparents, you know, my father and mother. And she said, you know, your dad took us sailing. And I said, well, how was that? And you know what her answer was? All he yelled about was me. Yeah, she said, all he talked about was to stop the jib from luffing. 40 years later, he hadn't learned a thing. I mean, I've had no relations with him. He's learned nothing.
Might I ask, is he still with us?
No.
Okay.
No. Neither of my parents are.
Okay. Okay.
They both died when they were 88.
So good innings.
I went to my great-grandmother's 100th birthday party, I tell everyone.
Goodness me. Goodness
I'm
me.
going to be 100. That's my goal.
That's your goal. You're going to swim at 100.
I'm going to swim 100 laps when I'm 100.
When you're 100.
That's my goal. But anyway, so, that's just an interesting
so
he just wouldn't change.
It's a good segue really into Mum, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, can I tell one other story I just realized I forgot?
Your show, please.
And we can always edit these out.
No, not at all.
As a kid, I thought it was fun to have little race cars with race tracks.
Oh, I had them.
Okay, everyone has those.
Yeah.
Well, my father and I were going to go down and we were going to build the racetrack together, which turned into me like when he worked sitting in a stool while he put the whole racetrack together and I sat there and watched. And I guess I did do a couple things while we were down there. And I still remember the comment. It's been 60 years since he commented. We went back upstairs after he built the racetrack, and he was talking to his mother, or to my mother, so I could hear it. And he says, you know, it's amazing, Barbara, and that was her name, obviously. My hands are so much bigger than Jeff's, but he's so clumsy. Even with my bigger hands, I can work better on these little cars than my son can, than Jeff can. And right there saying, well, I got poor ball coordination, I'm clumsy with whatever I do. And
It's an undermining.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
complete undermining.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the final example where when I say he never said anything nice, those are examples that I remember of exactly what he said.
Yeah.
You know, I was stupid, clumsy, and had no ball coordination.
Yeah. And yes, I empathize because I have exactly the same thing going on in mine.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Totally the same thing. Totally. But it's really not about ball coordination. It's about, everything.
Interesting.
It's not my speech. It's your
Well-
speech. We'll do one on me someday.
Say that again?
I say we'll do one on me.
Okay, yeah, definitely. All right, now when I was talking earlier, I said there was 3 environments that people grow up under. The daddy environment, the mommy environment, and the combination mommy-daddy environment.
Okay.
I'm now going to talk about the mommy environment that I grew up in. All right.
So you mentioned 3 environments, the second of which is the mummy environment.
Correct.
The floor's yours, sir.
All right. This is my mother. And she was the daughter, just to give you a little background, of a judge. You know, and he, from what I heard, liked poetry. He seemed pretty reasonable, but my mother took the right and wrongness of being a judge and ran with it to like it was a cult. Everything was either right or wrong, and there was no gray for anything. I think my mother had what psychologists would say was a narcissist personality disorder.
Really?
Yes. And the number one issue with someone who's a narcissist is they are never wrong. Never. I never heard my mother say, I was wrong about that. Or, Jeff, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Or, Jeff, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. She was, and in her mind, she was never wrong about anything. Never said sorry. She had a rule for everything. The way you dressed, there was 10 rules. Button-down collar, this button was buttoned, your shirt can't be untucked, it has to be ironed. She had a rule for everything, which I guess is okay, but the problem was, if you broke a rule, you didn't become wrong because you broke that rule, you became a bad person because you broke that rule.
For how long?
Ever.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. So it's not that you were wrong and were bad. You became, or no, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's not that you were just wrong, but you became a bad person because you thought differently than one of her rules. And as a bad person for thinking that, there was never any forgiveness available to you. You were a bad person with respect to that one issue forever.
By bad person, no forgiveness, do you mean no love, no attention?
No, oh yeah, I don't think my mother never told me she loved me. My mother never said anything nice. She wasn't as critical with the condensation like my father, but she hit me with barrages of rules. And I grew up a lot in the 60s when all the rules were changing. And she she couldn't handle that. And just a simple example was, I wanted to wear blue jeans to high school. Nice jeans, pants, but that was against the dress code. So if you wore blue jeans to school, you weren't wrong breaking the dress code, you were wrong and a bad person for breaking that rule.
Did you engage in the 60s radicalism, the music,
Oh, yeah.
the drugs and rock and roll?
I wasn't so much in drugs, but I rushed the
free
stage.
love and all that. Were you a hippie?
No.
Okay.
No, but I rushed the stage at a Jim Morrison and the Doors concert.
Sure.
I was up in the front and everybody else was smoking.
Yeah.
Marijuana just didn't, I tried it and it just made me feel worse.
Sure.
I was feeling bad enough.
Yeah.
And marijuana was not, and same thing with alcohol. I tried drinking, but that ruined my sleep even worse.
Yeah.
You know, so it was like 2 days for me until I slept.
So you say I've got a picture of your mum and dad in my mind that you've now painted. Was your mum also? Did your mum also have that set of rule that was set in stone until you were 30, or was it before?
Until she died.
Until she died.
Oh yes.
Goodness me.
Yes. I mean, I never heard her say, you know, maybe we did something wrong.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. So it really was.
She never said sorry for anything to me in her life.
How did you survive that?
It seemed normal to me. Remember, I don't know anything else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, my parents never hugged me. And people go, well, how did you survive that? It was actually, though, when people tried to hug me, that felt weird.
Did it?
Yeah.
Did
I
it?
mean, that felt strange, and it's like, you know, what are you doing? Because I had no kind of concept of what that would release the oxytocin in my body.
Well, that's exactly what it is a sensate. So, you know, the hug incorporates the senses, and therefore you get the touch, you get the smell, you get the sight.
Yeah.
You know, and you get the very experience of being with another human being.
Yeah.
It's a whole ethereal
once asked my mother why she never told us that she loved us. Mm-hmm. And you know what she said? She said, oh, that just made me feel so fake that I had to say I loved you for you to know that I loved you. Mm. You know, and it did. She would never say it because to her that felt fake. Can you imagine feeling fake telling your kids you love them?
No. It's almost Victorian, isn't it? So do you think...
Very. Very. Oh, yes.
It's a Victorian values thing, and my father did that, not my mother. My mother is an extremely loving woman, very, very loving, and it's great. It's absolutely wonderful. That's why I call her every day.
But see, that's where you get relief.
Oh, I do.
But see, I never had relief.
No.
Never.
So my question to you, I suppose, with today's world, which is terribly ephemeral, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, do you think that there will be a reconnect between parents and their children because of the stresses of today, because of the financial pressures of today, because of the pressure to still do the right thing, go to church, go to a good school, graduate from a good university? All this is tremendously costly, Jeff.
I feel it's getting less of a connection.
Do you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the kids are more connected to their phones than they are the parents.
You do? Yeah. And yet, you know, we can all go to the pool and it's great to see everyone and we have this camaraderie, and then I suppose in a way the children have a different vernacular today, and therefore their vernacular between them and their parents is very different to what we had, which was quite formal. I think if you have parents going, hey, what's up, check this out, and I was like, it's almost like the gap between the child and the parent in terms of age is getting less and less. So you've essentially got kids bringing up kids.
Well, no, actually the opposite is happening.
You think the children are bringing up...
No, I know that Now the average age to have your first child is 35.
Is that right?
Where when we were growing up, it was 25.
Wow.
So there's, I think, a greater distance between the children.
Do you think the children are at where we go every day, the swimming pool, do you think they're more or less confident than they were 20 years ago?
I don't know. Because again, I don't have any foundation to really make that kind of...
I think they're more. I think they're more together, but could be because it's the United States. They have more access to money, which brings me on to the questions. A couple of questions I have for you. Material possessions these days. You know, we know of an employee that bought a kid a $25,000 truck for the birthday. Is that real love?
No, of course not.
No. So,
No.
I mean,
That's got nothing to do with love, if you ask me.
Right, right. The real love would be the taking the kid to the game,
Yeah.
the theatre,
Yeah.
spending time with them,
Yeah.
helping them with the homework.
Yeah. Making them feel good about themselves.
So do you think children are bought off today?
They were bought off. They've been bought off. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's just so hard for me to compare today with my time because, my experience was just so strange.
Yeah.
Mine was not the typical, so it's hard for me to compare the typical of when I was growing up with the typical of today. I have no concept of what was typical back when I was growing up.
So then you started giving, and you gave of your time, and you gave of your skills, specifically in the water, specifically to me. When did that kick in? What age did that kick in, when you wanted to give?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I was a flight instructor at 19.
See, that's pretty impressive.
I
That's
was
nowhere near
teaching
30.
people to fly when I was,
Yeah,
maybe 20
yeah,
kind of thing. But
yeah.
so I was a flight instructor, and I don't know if I was being altruistic. So, I was trying to build time to go get the pie in the sky airline job,
Yeah.
But I tried to do a good job when I was being a flight instructor, and people told me I was doing a good job, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure I was out there trying to, give, or share. I was just...
But it seemed to me that what you went through in your life gave the world someone that came out and was happy, strong, influential, and an example to everyone. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Because what you are is a good man.
I try to be, yeah.
Yeah. So for all of, I think that, whether you believe in God or not, or spiritualism or not, I think there was definitely a plan where you went through that austerity and something or someone shaped you into the man that you are today, which is, I don't know if you've noticed, but you go into a room and you change the room, which is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Not everyone has that, It's a good ability.
Yeah.
It's a great
I'm
ability.
not so sure I knew that, but...
Oh yeah.